Hi. Hi, everybody. We're just going to start shortly. I'm just waiting for Rajiv and Vikas to join me. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Oh, wow, that's a fabulous view.
Hi, Tanya. Thanks for just flipping the camera around.
No problem. I don't mind seeing this view at all. Hi.
Better than our ugly mugs, right?
Yeah. No, not at all. This is great too. It's nice always to talk to two people instead of one. So thank you guys for being here with us.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for connecting with us. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are talking about stone as a reflection of culture and context today. And with me,
Right.
I have Rajiv and Vikas from Studio Code. I'll quickly introduce you guys. Studio Code understands and accepts the conditions of the contemporary world and dares to think outside the box by challenging convention and rethinking the normal, something that we all are doing these days. They place their designs in a beautiful, ordinary world and accept the conditions of the commercial. This approach makes them unique. They're a design firm that thrives in the challenges of the custodian. Rajiv is a practicing architect and urban designer with over 19 years of experience. He's the founding partner of Studio Code, an award-winning multidisciplinary design firm based out of New Delhi. He has worked in the US and India on a variety of architecture and urban projects of various scales. Architect and urban designer Vikas Kanojia also has professional experience of over 20 years. His urban design and master planning expertise includes both greenfield and brownfield projects with varied scales, context, and complexity. Currently, the duo is also academically associated with various architecture schools and colleges, including the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and the Sushant School of Art and Architecture, Gurgaon. So, thank you. Very nice to have you guys with us and share your experiences on working with stone. We follow a format, just quick 5 or 6 questions, then some questions from the audience, and last words from the both of you. So my first
Brilliant.
question to you both would be, stone is a reflection of culture and context, when it comes to commercial and residential spaces. Talking about culture and its relevance in design, how do you think stones help reflecting this ideology in your work?
So, the bulk of the work that we do is in India right now. India has such a wonderful, rich, beautiful heritage of using stones in their buildings. And having worked abroad, I can tell you that that is not normal. We in India sort of take stone for granted. We walk on stone sidewalks, we walk into our houses, and lots of houses have stones all over them on the floor and on the walls. Whereas abroad, stone is a rather rare, exquisite material. So I think part of it is acceptance that stone is part of our culture.
Yeah.
Stone is something which is just something we use in this country. It's how our buildings are made. It's something which we are familiar with. So the first part about stone is accepting that we do use it. It is representative of who we are as a people, representative of our buildings. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
And then that's how stone is used on the outside of buildings. We recognize buildings by the color of stone. People will still tell you Red Fort is this red stone. They may not know the name of the stone, which hopefully we as architects should know. But they know certain other buildings. There's history and heritage and culture, and basically stones are us. It's the kind of buildings that we make.
Yeah.
And then we start from there. We start from that point of context and culture and try to incorporate stones in a new way, in an interpretive way in newer and newer buildings.
Yeah, and it's something which is inbuilt in Indian cities. Stone to us is actually heritage. It's the built heritage of our country. So when we are in Delhi, there are these 7 to 8 cities that we talk about, whether it's Mehrauli, whether it's Shahjahanabad, whether it's Sri, all of these civilizations, and the civilizations, not only in Delhi, but the civilizations right from the rock cut architecture.
Yeah.
We recognize that that's where we started, from stone as shelter, and then that from towards various kinds of civilizations, we have been using stone. So it has a lot of associational value to us as architects, and as part of we as the creators of the built environment. We feel that it has a lot of associational value to us, which is what we try to learn from these civilizations and incorporate in our interventions. If you look at some of the very good examples, and the masters of this has been Mughals.
Yeah.
So whether you talk about Agra, whether you talk about Fatehpur Sikri, whether you talk about Shahjahanabad, not only outside but also interior spaces. When you look at their zananas, when we talk about interiors, which is the toilet spaces today. When we talk about Diwane Aam, Diwane Khas, look at their inlay work. Look at how they have combined various, they have combined stone with water, they have combined stone with metal, and various experiential spaces with respect to the lattice work, which is the light and shade we talk about in architecture. That's the spatial experience of those spaces.
Yeah.
So when you go into those spaces, it's a totally different environment you feel in those spaces.
Right.
So it's not just that, but I mean, I agree with Vikas, and to add on to that, because we have such a rich heritage of using it, stones today then start representing comfort, security, heritage, a sense of stability. And it represents a continuity for us from sort of our past into our present into our current projects. It's very comfortable. This is a material we're very comfortable with.
That's really fabulous, and I really like the analogy and the I mean, I think yes, it just makes logical sense that as Indians we should be sort of using leveraging stone to our advantage. So how do you think stone plays a role in spatial experiences?
So I mean, stone. I mean, once we start to use it, it actually has so many roles to play because it adds color, it adds texture in its raw form. That's just using stone in its raw form. Once we take it in its raw form and we treat it, or we polish it, or we grind it, or give it a different kind of finish, it adds different kinds of texture.
Yeah.
Stone can also be used to create visual elements. So what you see in the front of a building or an entrance is something which sort of makes something which represents the building as you see it from the front. Stone is also used for urban elements, like it's something which you see from the street, something which you see which creates character to your building and then makes your building relate to the context around it. So really all kinds of roles.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, sorry to.
yeah.
So, if you look at a stone, it has a lot of role to play in terms of the sensory perception of the space. It can change the perception of the space dramatically. If you use the stone with water, which is what civilizations have done, and we have been now using it in contemporary ways. It just plays with the senses, whether it's sound, whether it's light, whether it's even heat. Sunlight changes stone. There is refraction and reflection through air, through light. The water, when stone comes in contact with water, it changes color and it expresses, what's in the stone. It expresses its vein, the grain, the texture, and the stone takes different forms in different environment. And one of the examples I will just quote. There's a project we have done in Gurgaon. It's a house. It's a very low-lying house, small house where the client told us that he wants to experience space. So we created a courtyard and where we created this water wall, and we used the stone in a way where it's actually not a straight wall where we jig the It's like used at a slanting angle, and there is water flowing over it. So when the water flows over it, there is a trickling sound which comes out, which is so beautiful to hear. And then once it trickles down, it then hits the water below. So then there is again a sound which comes out. And we are also not using just stone and water as just one combination, but it's the holistic nature of the courtyard which creates the space. So, during the day there is light. So the stone changes color through light. During the day, when there is water on the stone, it changes color and the sound which it makes. So it's like more of an experiential courtyard that we created, like an oasis within Gurgaon itself.
I mean, another example I can give off the top of my head. I remember sort of, again, from other countries, some countries have a lot of importance given to wood underfloor. And it's that sense of the aging of wood, the texture of wood, feeling wood under your feet as you walk. And that's beautiful too. I remember one of our first projects, the clients told us that they love the feeling of cold stone in a Delhi summer. Right, and that's true.
That's true.
And that's something we can walk with, and you put your foot down, and it's that sense of comfort and temperature. And stone does that, sort of. It's comfortable for us, basically.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, the courtyard I was talking about, and it's the inspiration which we have derived out of the Mughal gardens of Rashtrapati Bhavan. So if you've gone there, you can see how the spouts have been treated, and there are these stone walls through which the water falls down, and there are these fish, cut into the marble itself, and the water trickles down beautifully, and it makes that sound. So it's again, that same contextual relevance which we are trying to use in our projects.
Very nice analogies, and I think you're absolutely right that that whole sense of comfort, especially in North India, climatically, it just makes a lot of sense. I think it's a conversation that I've also had with somebody else who was on this series too. That most people in summer actually prefer a stone floor, and they like to sit on the floor and then not as compared to anything else. So when you pick up stone for your own designs, right? What are the qualities that you particularly look for?
Well, I mean that's a very broad question. So
long,
and that's a long laundry list of qualities.
Maybe we can particularly talk about commercial spaces.
So commercial spaces, I mean, the commonalities of all stone selections would be everything from color, texture, grain. Does the stone have any filling? Where is it from? I mean, that's a really important question because there is a whole ecological aspect to stone which we really didn't consider many years back. I think when my career started, it wasn't in the top of our mind, but today we should start thinking about where the stone is coming from, what the mining process is, what the transport process is. So that's also in the back of our minds when we start to pick stones. But from the commercial point of view, 2 or 3 questions to me are very important. One is the hardiness of the stone, because the number of people who walk on it and move over it is usually far higher than residential spaces. Residential spaces tend to be maintained far more. So how tough is the stone? How thick is the stone? How much load and weight can it take? Will it crack if somebody drops things on it? All of these factors are in the back of our mind and they sort of play with it. And is the stone going to be very visible? So for example, in office spaces, one really wonders, it's beautiful to take wonderful stones, but very often people in the office will just carpet over it, or which is terrible, which sort of kills the idea of taking the stone. Or you'll see desks and tables and chairs and stacks of papers, in which case the question is, why are we taking sort of a beautiful stone? Why not take something hardier and more neutral and let the office stand out and speak in a different way?
Yeah, and there can be like multiple qualities that we look at in stone when we are selecting it. But yes, it is also purpose based in terms, which project that we are selecting for, whether it's a house, whether it's a commercial project, or whether it's a residential project. When we look at commercial projects specifically, as you said, there is a very positive way that we can look at also, because the commercial spaces gives us to play with scale. When we talk about commercial projects usually have larger spaces in terms of the lobby spaces, the congregational spaces, or the atrium spaces. So you can look at a stone pattern from a distance. So what we have done in few of our projects, there is a pharmaceutical plant we have done in Navi Mumbai. So where we looked at creating an artifact within a six-story tall atrium. So we have the base floor as a black granite, and we have this yellow Jaisalmer stone, which actually work as a ribbon and connects various levels of the floor within the atrium space. So the yellow Jaisalmer staircase is like designed as an artifact, and on one side it gets the morning sun, and that it changes the light and texture of the space right from the day to the evening, because the sunlight keeps moving, and also as it moves, because it's a staircase, it forms a very different kind of a pattern, and also changes different colors within the Jaisalmer stone itself. Similarly, we have I had done a project earlier with the firm I was working for, Bari Chopla Architects. So there, I was doing a paper lab building, and since there was a large atrium, I could actually do a pattern which talked about the story of the evolution of the stone. The Cyprus plant, and how the stone was evolved in the Indus Valley civilization. So we could just do like a story through that pattern within the atrium space, which was visible from various levels within the building.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. It gives us many possibilities within the commercial space. This is interiors.
Yeah.
I mean, exteriors are many other ways, because what we understand, stone also weathers.
Yeah.
Stone changes with respect to time.
Yeah.
It changes its grain, texture, color, and it actually ages. With the humans as well. So it ages with time.
Yeah.
So we tend to use stone in very raw form at places when we do cladding, so that it changes its color and pattern with the time as well.
Okay.
And commercial buildings do have that. They have usually larger surfaces, then you can do that. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So we've also seen that a lot of your work, in a lot of your projects, you experiment a lot with patterns, right, within stone. So could you share some tips on how one can play around with stone when it comes to patterns or textures, and maybe some examples as well, particularly in commercial spaces?
So
Go for it.
One of us will go.
Yeah.
I mean, a stone, can be used in, as I said, in multiple ways. One is, what is the intent that we are using with, or with a design idea. So as I said, in one of the projects, we tried to create an artifact. So where we used like a single stone as the base, whereas second stone was designed as an artifact. Whereas, in many other cases, we are trying to do flooring patterns. But we also try to understand that which combination works well. So, we always tend to select like two stones in parallel. So we look for a texture which will go, and the color which will also work well with the other stone and complement it. Whereas, so we always tend to use it as one as the primary stone, and second as the secondary stone in the patterns that we create. And it's always interesting to create these patterns, because these are something which you as you enter a space, that's the first thing that you see. And that can really change how a person is thinking or looking at a space, or what kind of a use that building has.
Sure.
But to answer your question in a slightly different way, so if you're talking about how does one make patterns, or how does one think innovatively, one part of that is obviously sort of architecture or design 101, which is color contrast, and I think of stones in terms of base, offset, color, border, and inset. Like, so there'll be 4 different elements in my mind. We obviously play with these, and that's fine. Those are designers' tools. I think the other part of it is that we have to understand that while stone is a beautiful organic material, technology has changed. and one has to think about whether one wants to go with traditional craftsmen. And craft is such an important part of stone. So whether we're doing stone cutting, so whether we want what is, at least in this part of the world, called a patang chal or a pan chal or whatever, we want diagonal cuts or 50, whatever the angles of the cuts, how we want the joinery to work. But alternately, if we want to move away from traditional sort of craft and go into machine cutting, now there's so much technology which has come into play when one can send off the stone for water jet cutting or CNC cutting, and you start getting these incredible patterns. And suddenly, I sense there was a loss of craft for a number of years where you really couldn't get that kind of finesse in projects. And on one hand, you can get very high finish, very high detail because the machine does it for you. And there is a danger there. It also leads to ubiquity because suddenly there are projects of many sort of architects, some of them are very well known who I've seen, where suddenly you realize sort of there is this stone jali which is repeating itself in many projects one after the other. And because we know the jali, we know the machine can cut it, we know what the tolerances are. And I think it's our job as designers not to repeat it, not to fall into that trap of being too comfortable with this technology and just running with it.
Yeah, that's a very very valid point, I think, Rajiv. So you also work with stone in its raw form, right? While obviously a lot of testing can be done, you in your projects you also use stone, the way it is really inherently, with exploiting its sort of intrinsic character. So
Yes.
when you talk about context, right? How do you think stone in its raw form can bring out the importance of context or culture or even elements? Sometimes stone in a particular form will bring out the true nature of a design element. So would you like to say something on that?
Sure. To give you an example, there was a project which was a very small, sort of very very small farmhouse, which we were sort of designing and executing outside Bombay. Beautiful little project designed in a mango orchard and on a hill. So the scene was idyllic. It was sort of this was the holiday we always wanted to take. So we were very happy when the clients asked us to design this house because we got to go to site, and it's on a slope of a hill. And I think both Vikas and I, in fact, went there a couple of times. And one of the things we were very conscious about was that we don't want to disturb the site too much, right? The context of the site is very beautiful.
Yeah.
We want to sort of take in the views, we want to take in nature, but architects have a habit of what I call putting down a very heavy foot.
Yeah.
Like, sort of as a very heavy footprint. And we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to, I think it was Renzo Piano who used a phrase in a very different context, but he said we should try to tread lightly as architects. We don't have to tread sort of brutally and heavily. So when we made a very low cut building which hugged the terrain, sort of came up and went back down. But then we had choices of stones. And so we were very conscious to use a local stone. So there's a local black basaltic stone which we wanted to use.
Right.
And we used it in rough form. Like we designed it so that it is not meant to be treated or polished. And the whole idea is that if you're sitting in the middle of nature, then what you're sitting on, what is underfoot, is natural, it's rough, it's coarse, and it just integrates well within the site. Now, if we go from that, which is one kind of context and its rough element, we can go to rather finished spaces inside cities, which are very different, which could be residential lobbies or hotel lobbies. And these are, for the most part, artificial spaces.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we accept, that these are artificial spaces. So when we use, or when I try to use material in its rough form there I'll use it as a feature. I'll accept that there's a treatment to certain parts and there are rough elements which are inset, so you feel the change in texture from smoothness to roughness on walls and on floors. It's sort of like a reminder that listen, nature's out there. You make an artificial box, but something natural is right there. It's at your fingertips. And it's a beautiful change in texture for people experiencing the space.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something about, one of the first projects as I graduated as architect, and I was working for Mr. Ajoy Chaudhary. And there's a project, Royal Ensign in Jaipur, which is right at the statue circle, which is designed as a lattice. And I was the project architect for that. And that was my first introduction to, stone. And, I mean, Jaipur is, full of craftsmen who are so skilled. They worked out a jali, which was like working out a furniture. Working with them and we were working with, simple, very basic red sandstone and dholpur as two different elements. And, the assembly part, and we used it in a very rough format, how it came from the query. We didn't polish it, but yet it was made up, the whole jali was made up of small elements, and it was like a puzzle which was joined together to create the assembly, of the corridors and balconies. And we created the jali, and it was so beautiful, when it actually got built and we were part of the whole process. And, you can touch the stone. You can touch the stone, you can feel it, you can see the texture of it. It was just so beautiful. So once you come in contact with stone, and when it's in the heat, in the sunlight, it will get warm. But when you touch it, otherwise in the evening it's quite cold and nice, and then there's a breeze which comes through. It's just so amazing to touch these raw stones.
So nice to see you both so passionate about stone, and it's like we could carry on this conversation forever. So, and I
Yeah, yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
the
In fact,
exciting examples, and through your journey as an architect. So it's really, I think one can really relate to these projects. I wish,
uh,
but this is
yeah,
fabulous.
yes, I
So,
was actually telling Rajiv, just before this, that these guys have really refreshed our memories of the past. 20 years back, I worked on a project. This we did, that we did, and it's so refreshing that we could talk about so much about stone.
I know.
Which when you gave the topic, we were like stone.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Most people ask me, what will we talk about for half an hour? And I always say there's so much to talk. In fact, we do a hard cutoff at about 35, 40 minutes just to,
Yeah.
in the interest of time. But this is very, very insightful. So my last question for today is, you also do a lot of housing projects. And the choice of stone in such projects is obviously, the stone has to be durable, it has to age well, and obviously within a certain budget, right? When it comes to using good stone, what are the stones that you would recommend while keeping budget in mind and durability, of course? In most cases, this is a one-time investment. So what would you recommend?
So that's a good question, and actually that's a very broad question. It's a very naughty question because there's a lot of range. So when one says housing, there's a lot of ranges in housing. But if one is looking at durability and a one-time purchase, I would actually possibly think of Indian stones a little seriously. I think there are a lot of clients who come to us who start with wanting Italian or Romani stones or some stones from some other country, and that's not necessarily even needed. One can get beautiful Indian stones in this country, which are very sturdy, very durable. You can make great stone joints and flooring, and you can do a lot of wonderful things with them. And I think we underestimate those stones. So if we were doing sort of the kind of housing which requires budgetary control, then those stones are a fantastic option to look at. And there are a number of colors available. There's a beautiful yellow Jaisalmer, there's Kota, and there's Udaipur green, and there are so many such Indian stones which you can mix in intelligent, contemporary, interpretive ways. And I think that's something we should look at for Indian kinds of housing because these are Indian stones. It's part of our culture, and by the way, it's fantastic for budgets. I also have, since we're talking about stones, I have a short, funny anecdote for you. We were talking about our past, and one of the funniest stories I know about sort of stone is I was working in New York, and as part of my job, there are these education training sessions, and we were taken to a stone shop. And as I said, stone in the United States, in New York, it was a relatively exotic material. It's not locally available, so they would import stones from all over the world. And as an Indian growing up with stones, it was very passe for me. I understood the stones as limestone, so on and so forth. At the end of the presentation, the presenter started presenting various different stones from all over the world to have us learn. And many of these were stones which, having already worked in India, I was familiar with. So I was a little bored, and he showed as his last stone a beautiful, great, exotic limestone, which completely lights and gives a lot of life to the space. And I was sitting in the audience as a young architect, and I was very curious because it looked very familiar. And I scratched my head and walked up to him, said, "Could you tell me what this stone is called?" And he went, "Oh, we just call it a limestone." And then when I said, "But where is it from? There'll be a mine." And he said, "Yeah, it's this place called Koda. It's a really, really exotic stone from India." And I wondered what the world had come, because we treat Kota stone as a stone we throw away in this country. And people in other parts of the world were looking at that stone as beautiful, glorious, hard, tough sort of limestone which can be used for so many purposes. And that's a lesson for me because I never forgot that. I know I came back to India and we started our practice and work together, and you realize Indian stones have so much quality and color and texture which we underrate. And for housing projects, particularly when we're looking at budget and looking at lifespan, those stones are really good options. Tanya, do we have an issue with the connection? Because hi. Hi, Tanya. Did you get what we said, or I think issue there?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I think, is it better now?
Yeah, we can hear you
Yes,
now.
yes, we can.
We're at the fag end of the session. So,
Yeah, can you hear us?
so I think this was really, really good. We have a lot of, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Your voice is,
Your video is freezing. Is the connection? You're back.
Can you hear me now? I think we're almost at the
Yeah,
end.
yes.
Yeah, great. So, thank you so much. This was really good. I think a lot of people have messaged. I think that means that this is a great session for them. My last so what?
Tanya, there's very little sound at our end.
Okay, you can't hear me. Wait.
now. Tell me.
Sorry, Tanya.
Yeah, better now.
Yes, better now. Thank you.
Okay. So we are following the hashtag Let's Talk Design. So what would be your final words for this?
Yeah, Tanya, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Now we can.
Now we can. Please go ahead.
So we are at A class. We are following the hashtag Let's Talk Design. So what would your closing words on Let's Talk Design be?
Yeah, so using stone, I think there is no limit to the explorations that we can.